whip.
Madam President, I ask that the chair execute the order of June 4th, 2024 with respect to the Sullivan nomination, that the confirmation vote occur at 11:40 a.m. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Madam President, I'd like to submit for unanimous consent request an article that appeared in the Chicago Tribune a year ago on May 3rd, 2023, without objection.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'm a liberal arts lawyer. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a researcher. So when I get into these fields, I want to say the words I use very carefully, not to misstate what is clearly the case. But this was an amazing article, which is entitled, "Device Uses Microbubbles to Open Blood-Brain Barrier to Treat Glioblastoma in Humans." It's a story of Northwestern medicine scientist Adam Sonnabend. Report results of first in-human clinical trial using a skull implantable ultrasound device to open the blood-brain barrier and repeatedly permeate large critical regions of the human brain. To try to translate this into simple words, the blood-brain barrier is something I don't understand. When we take 2 beers and drink them, we can feel it. So the alcohol has permeated the blood-brain barrier. But in the ordinary course of events, it is in fact a barrier for chemicals to enter the brain. Dr. Sonnabend is finding a way to get beyond that barrier. And it's for the treatment of what is known as glioblastoma, brain cancer. We know that very well on a personal basis here in the United States Senate. We have lost John McCain to glioblastoma, Ted Kennedy to glioblastoma, one of our Democratic cloakroom staffers, Tim Mitchell, to glioblastoma, and Hunter Biden, his brother, Beau Biden, died from glioblastoma. Why? Now I'm going to try to say this in simple words, and I hope I don't misstate it. Because when we discover the tumor, the first reaction is surgery to remove the tumor. And so you'll see with each of the people I've just mentioned, that experience take place. The tumor is removed, but unfortunately the chemotherapy that is common to stop cancerous tumors from emerging in the same area can't be used because of the blood-brain barrier. This barrier stops the application of the medicine. So the researchers are finding a way to get beyond that barrier, to bring chemotherapy to the brain of those suffering from glioblastoma. We lost the individuals that I mentioned earlier because the follow-up was so difficult because of this barrier. Now that's as far as I can go in layman's terms explaining the situation. But the reason I raise that issue is because it's timely. The reason it's timely is the doctor who is heading up this research at Northwestern University is a Mexican immigrant to the United States. He's been here almost 10 years. He has a team of 9 other doctors. They're all doing this research, critical NIH research at Northwestern, and I'm proud of the fact that they're doing it and doing it successfully. The point I want to make is the discussion of immigration here in the United States often is a discussion about fear and hate, that immigrants are somehow a threat to this country. Donald Trump has gone so far as to say they poison the blood of America. Now, those sorts of bigoted, hateful statements have been used throughout history to condemn immigrants. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Go to your favorite hospital, wherever it may be. Take a look at the roster of physicians and surgeons that are going to treat you and your family, and you pray to God they're successful. And notice how many names appear to be immigrants to this country. They probably are. And we should be proud of the fact that this nation of immigrants invites people to bring their talents to the United States and to succeed. Dr. Sonnabend, coming to the United States from Mexico, is certainly welcome. I want him to stay and be successful, and his team as well. We need his immigrant talent, as others will throughout our nation's history. They're going to make a difference in the lives of a lot of individuals. So when President Biden decides that he's going to open up immigration in the United States and give people an opportunity to live in this country and be part of its future, I say, as long as they go through a background check and we know that they're making a positive contribution, paying their taxes and following the law, they are welcome here in the United States. I say this with some prejudice. My mother was an immigrant to this country. Her son is a senator from the state of Illinois. And that, I think, is an indication of what can happen to the sons and daughters of immigrants given a chance. That's what America is all about. Madam President, it's been more than 20 years since I decided to introduce a bill called the DREAM Act. This bipartisan legislation provides a pathway to citizenship for young immigrants who were brought to the United States as children. These young people, who are known now as dreamers, grew up in the United States, went to school with our kids, pledged allegiance to the only flag that they've ever known, and poll after poll shows the vast majority of Americans believe they deserve a chance. They didn't make their family's decision to come here. Their family made the decision, and they grew up here. We support, on a bipartisan basis, giving dreamers an opportunity to become American citizens. I'm sorry they were not expressly included in the president's proposal, but in one aspect they were. Time after time, the DREAM Act has earned bipartisan support in Congress, only to ultimately be blocked by Republicans. Without congressional action every day, dreamers live in fear of their lives being uprooted by deportation. Now, Dr. Sonneborn is not a dreamer. Don't make the mistake of equating that situation. But he is an immigrant. And the point I'm trying to make is immigrants can make valuable contributions to our lives. When I started off on the DREAM Act, I introduced the bill, and there was a battle between me and Orrin Hatch. You didn't get a chance to serve with him, but he was a Republican from Utah and proud of it. And he believed that the DREAM Act was his first idea. I thought it was mine, but the majority at the time was Republican. And I said, Senator Hatch, you would be the lead, it'll be a Hatch-Durbin bill. Well, over time, he decided that he didn't like the idea any further and dropped his sponsorship of the legislation. But I continued pressing forward with it. Lucky for me, there was a former Republican senator from Indiana named Richard Lugar, an extraordinarily good man. I asked him to appeal to President Barack Obama, because they were personal friends, to use the president's executive authority to help dreamers. 12 years ago, President Obama answered this bipartisan call from Senator Lugar and myself, establishing the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, better known as DACA. DACA is a form of the DREAM Act. It has protected more than 830,000 young people from deportation. Many have gone on to serve our nation as doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, and first responders. President Biden faces a dilemma similar to President Obama's. He's tried to work with Congress to fix the broken immigration system, and it is broken, but Republicans have repeatedly thwarted his efforts. Most of us believe that we had an opportunity for a breakthrough, a bipartisan effort with Senator James Lankford on the Republican side leading the way, as well as two Republicans, Senators Murphy and Sinema, two Democrats, Murphy and Sinema, to make this a bipartisan effort. They had a bipartisan border security bill that's coming before Congress. At the very last minute, when this measure was about to be considered, Donald Trump stepped in and said, stop. I don't want any Republicans in the Senate to support a bipartisan effort to solve the border crisis. Stop what you're doing right now. I would rather have the issue to debate in November than to have you try to solve it and give Biden any credit for it. And he said at the end of his statement, former President Trump did, you can blame me. Well, I am blaming him. That he stopped a bipartisan effort to solve the border crisis. When the bill came to the floor, the vast majority of Republicans opposed it at his request. And in fact, as he said, blame it on me. I do. The former president has made it clear he does not want a solution to our immigration challenges before the November election. He wants a campaign issue. He has demonized immigrants, saying, and this is one of the most despicable quotes I can think of, that they are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. He has promised to round up and deport every undocumented immigrant in our country, including dreamers. In light of this Republican obstructionism, President Biden has no choice but to use his authority as president to improve our broken immigration system. That's why 3 months ago, I led a group of 19 Senate Democrats asking President Biden to protect immigrants with deep roots in our country, including dreamers and the spouses of U.S. citizens. This week, President Biden responded, taking action to protect immigrants who've been here for decades, paying taxes, and contributing to all of our communities. The President is helping Americans with non-citizen spouses keep their families together by allowing them to apply for lawful permanent residence, a status they are already eligible for without leaving the country. He's also allowing dreamers and other immigrants who have earned a degree from an American college and received a job offer from a U.S. employer related to their field to more quickly receive work visas. I commend President Biden for taking these steps, but ultimately only Congress can fix the immigration system in America. To my Republican colleagues who may criticize the president, instead I urge you to work with Democrats to pass immigration reform legislation. Madam President, I just want to conclude this part of my opening statement by saying this issue means so much to me. It was over 20 years ago that I introduced the DREAM Act, as I mentioned earlier. I've come to know these young people, and I've come to try to help them over and over again. We've had some success on the floor where we would pass a measure and the House would not take it up. But despite that frustration, they continue to soldier on every single day, despite fear of deportation, to do their best to be part of America. Given that chance, they have proven themselves over and over again. I often think when you consider the hundreds of thousands of individuals who have been helped by the DREAM Act, by DACA, and other provisions, how few cases there have been where they've disappointed us publicly. The law of averages says there's bound to be somebody that's going to break your heart out there, who calls himself a dreamer and does something that you don't like at all. But by and large, they are an amazing group of people who never, ever give up. And now they've asked, for example, some help with their parents. What President Biden suggested is going to give that help. Some of the parents now are going to have an opportunity to live in America with their families without fear of deportation. That, to me, is what this country should be all about.